We taking charge. We overcoming the odds. You never thought. Look at me now. Look how we raising the bar. We going far. We going far. We going straight to the stars. If you ain't know it by now, you better know who we are. You know we out of your league. You do not want to compete. We overcoming defeat. Look how we running the streets.
All right, guys, welcome back to we were going to be ending the season with Bradley, but we're actually going to end it with Brendan Kane, the last episode of season 1 of the EgoLess podcast. I've got Brendan Kane, author of Hook Point. He's worked with Rihanna, Taylor Swift, and actually just bought your book on Audible last night, and about an hour and a half into it.
Oh, thanks for checking it out. I appreciate it.
So, when I look at everything that you do, you've kind of you've created these ecosystems that a lot of people are having trouble trying to figure out today. But I think that you did it with something that everybody's missing, which is a value prop. Everybody has access to the exact same platforms. What separated you of hey, I'm going to do this differently than everybody else is doing it?
Well, it took me some time of reflection, of looking back past on the past 15 years and really analyzing what allowed me to be successful, because people would always ask me, well, how did you get a job in a movie studio? How did you close Taylor Swift as a client? How did you close MTV as a client? How did you generate 1 million followers in 30 days? And all of those successes for myself and for the companies that I worked with, it was really about how do I stand out? How do I differentiate myself in a very succinct and quick manner to grab that attention, to win the opportunity for a conversation? Is the world that we live in today there's over 60 billion messages sent out on digital platforms, and that's billion with a B. It's crazy. Between push notifications, emails, phone calls, social content, whatever it is just, there's so much noise. And the world that we're living in today is you're no longer competing against your direct competition. You're competing against every piece of content. So like it or not, you're competing against LeBron James. You're competing against Netflix. You're competing against The Rock and Kevin Hart and all these media juggernauts. So you have to find a way to grab that attention to earn the right to express what you want to share with your audience or your core consumers. And that's really what has allowed me to be successful, is I just look at the world a little bit differently, and I analyze it from the standpoint is whether it's just starting off in the film industry as a PA making coffee, how do I grab the attention of a studio head or a producer or a director? Or I'm walking into a meeting with MTV, how do I go into a boardroom with 15 of the top executives and have them take me serious when I'm just a young kid? Or it's how do I navigate the conversations of getting to a Taylor Swift or closing a Taylor Swift, or whether we're generating direct response campaigns or organic content? It's all about mastering the art of winning that attention so you can get to the core message that you want to share.
Dude, I think that's something that so many people that they don't want to actually do. We live in such I always tell people, when you go around, I can tell you basically what people are thinking. And it's this little voice in their head that goes, me, 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 me. Everybody is thinking about themselves all the time. And it's if you can give them a value prop or do something that catches their attention, then you've got an opportunity that most people don't have.
You hit it on the head, and it's not that, I don't want it to make it sound like it's coming off from an ego thing. It's just when we're designing content, we're designing an ad or a pitch or whatever it may be, we're designing it from the way that we perceive the world. We design it from what are we looking to achieve. And I always recommend, and the way that I go into it is, I don't think about what I want or what I'm looking to sell or what I'm looking to achieve with the meeting. I go in and it's how do I understand this person on the other side of the screen? How do I understand this person on the other side of the table? And how do they perceive the world? How do they perceive their greatest challenges, the obstacles, what keeps them up at night? And the minute that I can understand that about somebody, then I can propose a solution to them of how I can assist them. And the perfect way to think about it is just think about yourself. What keeps you up at night? What drives anxiety? What wakes you up in a cold sweat? What stresses you out? And just imagine somebody shows up at your door and says, I know what you're experiencing. I feel your pain. I see what you're going through. And I want to solve that for you. Will you allow me to help you solve that? What are you going to say?
I mean, you can't
You're
say
going to
you
say
can't,
yes.
yeah, you got to.
Like, why would you? Versus, I'm going to start with, I want to sell you something. And there's a fine line between, and there's this saying that's so true, is people hate to be sold to, but they love to buy things. You don't go off and try and sell your message or sell your product or service. It's how do you provide value? How do you solve that ultimate pain point or just some pain in that person's life? And the minute that you position it that way, you'll ultimately succeed.
Man, that's deep. Like it really is. And I feel like it's a known thing, right? Like people know, but there's a difference in actually like putting it into action. Like when did you develop that? Like because this is what this whole podcast is about, is egoless, getting outside of our ego and thinking about other people. But when did you start to actually develop that and then put that into practice? Because that's not a very common thing.
Very early on. The earliest memory I have of doing it is probably high school, because I remember an instance where I had one of the school bullies say basically that he was gonna kill me. He called me up and threatened me, and it scared the hell out of me. And I was like, well, what am I gonna do? So I decided, okay, there's this other group of kids that get stereotyped as like the crazy ones, which they weren't really crazy. It's just, how in high school they get stereotyped and they
Yeah.
were known for like stabbing people. And they didn't really stab people or anything like that. And I knew these guys, and I was just like, well, if I could provide value to these kids and I can connect with them, maybe that will eliminate this bully from wanting to attack me. And that's what I did, is just, I was like, okay, then I thought about it, is like, what do these kids need? And I would see them waiting outside after school, waiting for the bus. And I was lucky because I was older. I had failed first grade, so I had to repeat first grade. So I was older in high school, and I had a car and I had a driving pass. So I just said, hey, let me give you a ride home, so that they didn't have to wait for the bus and they didn't have to sit on a bus and all that stuff. And I forged a connection that way. I'm sure I did it earlier than that, but that's my first memory of it. And I don't know if it was the way that I was raised or if it was just something I figured out along the way, but it was always about like, what is it that I can provide to somebody that offers value to just build that connection with them. And, the early example early on, I think I was going on the hypothesis, I want to do this so I get something out of it. But the more I did it over the course of my career, it was really becoming less and less about what I get out of it and more about just how do I provide value, and having that mindset going directly to that and standing out that way.
Because I believe in laws of the universe, right? Given it will be given unto you. Do you think that if you wouldn't have made that decision, because a lot of people have basically two different options, right? That when that bully called you up, which is and I'm not a bully expert, and I always like, if somebody's being bullied, like they need to go, make sure it's handled, especially if somebody's starting to kill you. But you made the choice of rising above the situation, say, hey, this, I'm going to go add value to this group, and this dude's not going to want to mess with me. Do you think that if you wouldn't have made that decision, you would be kind of who you are today? Because like I look at it like the way you do anything is the way that you do everything. And so many people, they want to win big, but they don't even focus on winning at these small things that are necessary. So do you think that if you wouldn't have taken that step, that you would still be in the same position that you are in today?
I think I would be. I mean, I operate under that I will keep testing until I find the right answer. So ultimately, I believe that I would have found that answer. And again, that's the earliest time I can remember. I'm not going to say it was the first time I did it. So I believe, just based on the way that my brain operates, that I would have ultimately found that answer. It may have taken me a little bit longer, but I would have gotten there. Because it is like, unless you are a narcissist and just really good at just charming people, which is not my core skill set, you ultimately have to provide some value or stand out in a unique way to be successful. Especially in today's world, it's getting harder and harder and harder to really stand out. And without mastering the art of gaining that attention and doing it in a unique way, you're really going to struggle to reach the level that you ultimately want to.
No, that, I mean, even on this podcast, I feel like everybody has a podcast. And I know you'd never heard about me until today. But so at 20 years old, I was homeless, became a self-made millionaire by 25, all by knocking on doors, selling roofs. Ended up losing it all, went through a divorce, and then made it all back again. But I always thought that money and that, the house and everything was going to make me happy. And it never did. But now fast forwarding, so I'm still in construction. I do this because this is what I love to do. But getting the attention, like you said, 40,000 new songs are released on Spotify every single day. It's like, how can you even differentiate yourself? And so for us, we've been approached for doing like a reality TV show about my life and the business, which would then incorporate the podcast, because I feel like I'm looking at it this way. Disney makes films to sell products. 80% of their revenue comes from merchandise. So they create a community, right, through movies. Like when a girl goes and watches Frozen, she will beg her parents to go spend $30 on a doll that maybe cost them $2 to make, because they created a community. People go to Pawn Stars out in Vegas just to they'll go pay overpriced for a pawned item just to say they bought something for Pawn Stars. So we're going to be going to, I don't know if I'm going to take the deal, just because when it comes to like who owns the content, but adding value and entertaining and informing all at the same time.
Well, I think you hit it on the head. Is like those examples is they're leveraging hooks to grab attention around this intellectual property to drive you into the core of what they ultimately want. So when I talk about this concept of a hook point, there's 3 core pillars to it. The first pillar is grabbing attention. If you can't win the first 3 to 5 seconds, you've lost. You will never get to the rest of the conversation that you want to have. And the second core pillar is, once you have the attention, is what is the story that you tell them? Because once you have the attention, you have to maintain it. You have to retain the attention you've garnered to build that relationship, which then plays to the third core pillar is, are you doing it in an authentic way? Do people trust and believe in what you're saying? And all 3 keys have to play together, or each of the 3 key pillars have to play together in order to be successful. If you can't grab attention, you'll never get to the story. If you grab attention and the story falls flat, you've lost the attention. If you've grabbed attention, you have a good story, but people don't believe it, then it falls apart. And even when you talk about like Pixar, for example, and Brave, if you see all the studios now, they'll have a 3 to 5 second trailer before the trailer plays. They do it both on TV spots and social, because they know that first 3 to 5 seconds is critical. And what do? Is they garner that attention through this intellectual property, through these movies that they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on. They tell this story, and then they do it in such a way that hopefully people believe it and have an authentic connection to it. And once they have that, then they can push them into merchandise. They can push them into theme park sales and all of it. And that's where you look at what Disney's done that's so brilliant. They acquire Pixar, then they acquire Marvel, and then they acquire George Lucas Studios. Why? Because all of those are hooks to grab attention into the Disney brand. Disney is smart enough to understand that, yes, they have a powerful brand, but if they don't keep finding new ways to grab that attention and bring them into that, they lose. It's the same with Facebook. Why is Facebook so smart? They go off and acquire Instagram. They go and acquire WhatsApp. They spin out Messenger. They have these different hooks into their core brand. And I don't know if you just saw, but with like they just connected Messenger within Instagram and Facebook, so all of them are connected together. Same with Netflix. It drives me nuts when these analysts say, "Oh, Disney Plus is launching, Netflix is dead." People don't give Netflix enough credit. They spend $17 billion a year on content. Why? The same principles that we just broke down for Disney is they only need 5% of those shows to work to prop up the whole business. They only need one Stranger Things. They only need like one major movie, like a Will Smith movie, to prop up subscribers, and then they use the rest of the content from a retention standpoint. So it's oftentimes I see companies like Disney, Amazon does this, Netflix, Nike. Nike spends $7 billion a year on endorsements. Each of those are hooks into their brand. They're playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers.
Did
They know.
Did you come up with that saying?
No, I definitely did not come up with that saying.
I've been saying that for a while, and everybody's like, "Man, that's a good saying." And I never heard it anywhere. But I always said your ego will have you playing checkers while other people are playing chess.
I think it's been around for quite some time, but it's a great analogy for life and just things in general. Is really thinking about it from the larger perspective.
And you know what? A customer base should only be as loyal to a company's dedication to innovation, which is always new. And I think that's what Netflix did, because they aren't just putting movies on there. Now they're putting authentic, just like what you talked about on the step 3, is they're putting authentic things that are, hey, you can only get this on Netflix, and really they've really changed the way that we do life, right? With Blockbuster, for instance. Blockbuster had the chance to buy them, but they didn't, because they didn't see it. And even now with Netflix, everybody's trying to keep up with Netflix, even these major brands. Now, somebody like you who's been constant in innovation, like for me, I can go into a business and say, here's the 3 things or 4 things that you need to do, and basically just write out a roadmap for them. But when it comes to doing it for myself personally, I feel like there's a brain disconnect. Like what I can look at another brand and do, I can't do for myself. Do you have that ever happen to you, where it's like you can go out and make another company great, but then when it comes to thinking about your own brand, is it a little bit harder?
When we're talking about hook points, no, because that's what I've done for the entirety of my career. There are definitely blind spots, and like we all have blind spots, and there's certain parts of the business that I definitely need perspective and help on. But when it comes to really differentiating myself, it's just a part of the natural process of the way that my brain works. And I have to do it for my business. Like you said, if I don't innovate my brand, my business, the hooks that drive people into me, then I fail to grow and reach the expectations and goals that I've set for myself.
No, it is. I mean, it's a way of life. People just, like that saying, excellence is an act, but a habit. Therefore we are what we repeatedly do. It's just a repeating of life. And then you get the outcome. So I know that, different platforms are best for, different things. Where are you putting all of your attention? Whether is it Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn?
So most of our focus right now is on the advertising platforms and mastering direct response advertising to sell into books, to sell into products and services. We're all also actively focused on YouTube. For our clients though, like we're across the board. It's just for our stuff and the way that we operate is we get super hyper focused. So the past 2 years has really been direct response advertising to drive transactions and revenue at scale. Prior to that, it was really follower growth, organic growth, and now we're marrying the two, really master the art of that. Because I come from big brand awareness, big entertainment. How do we reach as much people as possible? And now I'm really focused on, okay, how do you drive that attention into massive scale for transactions?
It makes, I mean, it makes sense. This is a whole new world for me. I came from a blue collar background, and kind of coming into now that I invested all my money into a fintech company, and it's a totally different world. So even like what you just said there, it's like it makes sense, but it's like, dang, it seems a lot bigger than my brain can wrap around. But I know that if I spent some time working on it, I'd understand it. So it's just, I think I always love connecting with people who are in a totally different world, because I've always been small brand, small business focus versus having those the major brand and going after the masses.
Yeah, and it's just the way that I started my career. Is starting off in the film industry, you were trained to think big, because if you didn't think big, you were fired. I could never go into a meeting and pitch something that was going to reach 10,000 people or 100,000 people or even a million people. You get fired. So that's just ingrained in my DNA for business, is like how to think as big as possible. And that's just the path that I've chosen. There's nothing wrong with the other approach of, like, somebody had broken it out to me, a friend of mine that's one of the top copywriters in the world. He's like, what you've actually done is the reverse of the 1,000 true fans. Because the 1,000 true fans is like, just identify and build your 1,000 true fans one by one, and ultimately you can make a living off of that. Versus I take the opposite approach, as I go as wide and loud as possible, and then within that I identify my 1,000 true fans. So for example, building 1 million followers in 30 days was a hook into a larger conversation. And the exercise wasn't, how do I generate 1 million people that are going to buy my products or services, but how do I connect with 1 million people to leverage that hook, tell that story, to then get a publishing deal, to speak on stage in front of thousands of people, to get on television, to get on podcasts, to get in print magazines. And through that, I will identify my 1,000 true fans. Now, that doesn't say that with those 1 million people that I connected with, that it wasn't in there. It was, but my strategy was different than most people. And again, it's going against the grain and standing out in a unique way. And oftentimes that means you have to do things very differently than everybody else.
That's been one of my biggest things in my life is, all right, if everybody's going one way, why in the world would I want to compete? When I go knock doors when I was in Dallas, this was a few years ago, I'd knock doors after a hailstorm, because we'd say, hey, we get the insurance company to replace your roof. Well, there was probably, I don't know, 50 people who would knock on the door right before you, because it's like a swarm. It's like an infestation of roofers. And I'm just like, man, these people, when I go knock at these doors, they hate me, and rightfully so, because I'm like the 50th person that's interrupted their day. I'm like, man, I got to do something different. It's not going to be advertising, right? Because you look at their front door and they've got books and books of, literature dropped off. I'm like, man, what can I do differently? So I printed off these bright orange stickers that says, I already have a roofer, please don't knock on my door. And so when I went and started knocking on that door, that person, they wanted to be so pissed off at first. I said, hey, no, I get it. It's, it's terrible in the neighborhood. I'm actually going around helping out the neighborhood and handing out these orange stickers that says, I already have a roofer, please don't knock on my door. That way nobody else is going to knock on your door. And people were just blown away that I did that. And if they didn't have a roofer, they would give me the opportunity to earn their business. And even if they did, they'd walk me over to one of their neighbors who hadn't picked a contractor yet. And there was not a single bit of advertising. Like, I could have spent $50,000 in advertising and not got the same outcome that I got for printing off $20 worth of bright orange stickers.
Yeah, and we do this all the time. And what you did was a pattern interruption. As people are accustomed to this specific pattern of what to expect. And if you get lumped into it, it doesn't matter how good you are, their preconceived notion of you is going to cloud any ability to actually hear what you're saying. So once you interrupt that pattern, it gives you that chance to get to the next part of the conversation. And that's where it's like, if you see in my books, both of my books are dedicated to people that are around the world that have the ability to transform it in a positive way. They just don't know how to get their message to be heard. And I fundamentally believe that there's so many remarkable people out there, probably a lot of people listening to this podcast, that have an amazing brand, have an amazing message, have an amazing product or service, something that they can offer the world. But the bottom line is, it doesn't mean anything if you can't win those first 3 to 5 seconds. Because if you can't win those first 3 to 5 seconds, nobody will get to your story. Nobody will get to your purpose or your why. Like, there's a lot of great information. Like, I don't know if you follow Simon Sinek, of like his start with why. Great message, great information, extremely valuable. But it doesn't mean anything if you can't get people to stop. And the same, bringing it back to the analogy of you going and walking on neighbors' doors, is you could be the best roofer on the planet. You can be the best roofer that ever lived. But if you've just followed 30 other people, and the minute you knock on that door, if they just be like, they're going to be like, oh my God, this is another roofer, it's going to sell me something. They'll never get to your true genius. But what you did is you flipped it. You interrupted that pattern and say, listen, I'm not here to sell you anything. I know that this is a problem. Here's a sticker to put on your door that I created just for you to alleviate that. And what does it do? It changes the entire dynamic, changes the entire conversation, brings their guard down. So now they can actually hear what you have to say. And then once they get to talk to you, then they're gonna be like, oh, this guy is by far the best roofer I've ever heard of. And like, to your credit, even if they didn't have a roofer, they'll walk you down the street to their neighbor. And that's where people are missing the point, is like, maybe 20 years ago, you built an amazing product and all of a sudden people find it. And I'm not going to say that never happens today. Sometimes it does happen, but the world that we live in is super noisy, super oversaturated, and you've got to find a way to win that initial attention so that you can get to the next phase of the conversation.
Man, that's huge. There's so much like knowledge and wealth in there. I'm excited to read both of these books, dude, just because there's so much. I mean, even listening to you, a lot of times, like when I'm talking, I blow people's minds, but when I'm listening to you, it's like my mind's blown, just like of all of these things. And I think that so many times, like we try to get a ton of information, but it's like, all right, we take these little things and then put them into practice. And then once we put them into practice, then something else can become a habit. What is next? I mean, people ask me what's next. I don't really like that. What is your why, and what's the future look like that you are creating?
Well, where I'm best served in the world and helping people is with what we've been talking about, is how to win the first part of the conversation. That's where I've had success over the past 15 years. And really what I enjoy doing is I want to help people that have an amazing message, have something to offer the world, and they're just struggling to win that first part of the conversation. That is essentially why I spent 2 years putting all the information in the Hook Point book, and also built an agency around developing hook points for people. So that's really the core focus for me right now, and probably into the distant future as well.
So is that, and what I had the name of the agency. What's the name of the agency that does that?
It's Hook Point. So it's similar. It's the same as the book. So the book point is Hook Point: How to Stand Out in the 3-Second World, and the agency is Hook Point. You can go to hookpoint.com.
Now, what? Because I'm sure that we'll have some people that are business people want to go there. What do they have to be a certain size of company to come on board, or what's the requirements?
There is no requirements. We work with people that are just starting out, and we work with multi-billion-dollar corporations. The only thing is it's pretty expensive to work with us. So we just want people that either have the money to invest or are very confident in the direction that they're taking. And the most important thing is, are they going to put in the work? We can develop the roadmap and the strategy, but you've got to execute on it. You've got to put in the work to make it happen.
And what you guys do really does make all the difference in the world, especially when it comes to, like, I love guerrilla advertising or guerrilla marketing, some people call it. I seen a billboard I even posted on my LinkedIn where it was a orthodontist office, and it showed a picture of a girl with a mask and said, "Hey, this is the best time to get braces." because you can wear a mask to hide it. It's like, man, that
That's
kind of
brilliant.
stuff is, yeah, brilliant and catchy. It's like, if you're going to pay for the ad space, you might as well make it, catchy. Oh, I know we're coming up on time. Dude, Brendan, it was incredible. I'll put your links and everything so people can get the books and follow you. But dude, like, I'm glad we had this conversation today, and I look forward to the future. If you need anything, anybody look at some places for you in Texas or something, I can always help you out down here.
Cool. Well, it was a true pleasure to connect with everybody listening and with you as well. I really appreciate the time and having me on the show.